All right. I think we're up.
Okay.
Sorry about the little lag there. So yeah, hello and welcome
Hi.
to our first virtual artist talk from the Metal Museum. So just to clarify, Sophie and I are speaking to each other on Zoom, and it is broadcasting on Facebook Live. So there's a little bit of a delay. But yeah, I'm so excited to be able to see you and talk to you. This is fun.
Yeah. Looking forward to it.
So my name is Nancy Cook. I go by Nan, and I am the exhibitions manager at the Metal Museum. And I'm here with Sophie Glenn. Sophie is our current Tributaries artist, and she is a furniture maker and a metal worker originally from New York. And we installed Sophie's exhibit pretty much immediately before we had to close the museum due to the COVID crisis. So sadly, we had to postpone your reception, which was supposed to be on March 15th. But we're glad that we have you now and that we get to do this. So I'm going to give a really quick sort of intro, and then I have questions for you. And then while I'm asking questions, please, everybody watching, post questions below. And when we have time at the end, we'll go through as many of those as we can or that we have time for. So that'll be great. And the other thing I should mention is you can actually view Sophie's show on our website. We have a virtual tour. So if you go, actually, I think below this post on our Metal Museum site on Facebook, you will see a link to Sophie's exhibit page. That's on metalmuseum.org. Click on the virtual tour link. You can see a 3D version of the tour. It's really cool. And you can look at these pieces while we're talking about them. So that'll be cool. So first and foremost, I got to do some thank yous. First to the sponsors, because we couldn't do anything that we do without them. Our sponsors are amazing. So this exhibit that we're talking about, Tributary Sophie Glenn, is supported through an Arts First grant from First Horizon Foundation and Arts Memphis. The Metal Museum receives ongoing exhibition and programming support through the Wingate Foundation and Hyde Family Foundation, and ongoing operational support through Arts Memphis and the Tennessee Arts Commission. And we are so grateful to them, as always, for their support. And then, as always, I gotta thank the staff, the amazing Metal Museum staff who help carry pedestals and help carry artwork and do everything to help install the exhibit, to help me install the exhibit, and then everybody who helped get this talk together. And then, of course, finally, thank you to you, Sophie, for being here and being flexible, even though we had to postpone everything. And I'm so glad that we were able to get together to do this talk. It's awesome. So Tributaries is an exhibition series. And it's an exhibition series that provides solo exhibitions to young artists like Sophie, who are just beginning to sort of make their mark, pun intended, on the field of fine metal work. So I'm really glad that I get to talk to you today. And so we'll get going with questions. And like I said, everybody watching, post your questions just below this, and we'll get to them at the end. So my first question for you really is just, How are you doing during all of this? Are you self-isolating? How are you coping? And then if you're working from home, what are you working on?
Well, I'm doing okay for the most part, or considering the circumstances. I'm actually in my studio right now, but we're actually going to be doing a shelter-in-place order starting tomorrow. So I will be working from home permanently from then on out. And I'm not really working on anything in particular right now, just because I'm still kind of teaching and still got a lot of things to figure out and get stuff together in terms of that. So right now I'm kind of in research mode. So I'm not really doing, well, I'm doing stuff, but not physical stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So first, tell us a little bit about your background as an artist and creating furniture.
So my background is actually mostly in sculpture. I got my undergrad degree from SUNY Burgess College in sculpture. And it was there where we had a visiting arts program while I was a student there. And I met Vivian Beer through that program, and she does furniture and metalworking. So she really kind of helped me fall in love with both of those mediums. And then from there, I went to San Diego State University, where I studied furniture making, furniture design, and woodworking while I was there. And now I'm here in Mississippi State teaching sculpture. So my background in furniture is really more in metalwork than it is in woodworking, so it's a little bit backwards, I guess, in that respect. But I love them both. So.
Nice. Yeah, you know, Vivian is another former tributaries artist, and this is the only previous furniture maker that we've had as a tributaries artist prior to you, so that's great.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, you're breaking up on me a little bit.
Technology.
Hmm?
All right. We'll see if for this next question. I think maybe if you read the Facebook window, that might help.
Okay. Oh, I don't have it open, so.
All right.
Sorry, everybody.
So the series that I'm going to display is Number Sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And the works are fabricated in steel, but they look like wooden antiques. How did the idea for this kind of
So I actually had the idea while I was in grad school, but I wasn't really quite confident enough in my abilities as a furniture maker or metal worker to really get that body of work. So I kind of sat on it for a little bit. It wasn't until I did a residency at the Appalachian Center for Craft in Smithfield, Tennessee, where periodically we would have open studio times where people from around county would come in and ask questions, all this out there. So I given the question I had was point at the time I was making wood and steel pieces, and I would get people periodically come in and ask me like, "What kind of wood do you use?" And it would be clear that to me that the pieces were wood and steel, but they would only care about the wood aspect of it, or they just wouldn't even recognize the steel in those pieces, and they would just assume that everything was made out of wood. So it's kind of out of that frustration where I decided to rethink the body of work that I have at the Tributary Show now. And it's like, well, if people are going to mistake them for wood, then I might as well trick them a little bit. So make use of the situation, I guess.
That's awesome. I think if you mute your side when I'm talking, that's going to be helpful.
Hmm?
Like if you press mute in Zoom on your side when I'm talking, boom, there we did it. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody. Again, this is the first time we've done this. We're still working through some kinks, but awesome. Okay, I think we figured that out. Thank you to Tim Lee, who just commented and made that suggestion. So viewer help. That's what we're here for. Okay, so that's really interesting about this wood versus metal thing, and that's really also present in your show throughout your work. So tell us a little bit about, when we're talking about how your works are fabricated in steel, what does fabrication mean? And what are some of the specific techniques that you're using? Just talk us through your creative process a little bit. Oh, make sure to unmute, Sophie.
Okay. So fabrication for me, I do a lot of sheet metal fabrication. So what that entails is I start out with a big sheet of steel, and I'll cut it down, bend it, maybe hammer it into a form to create whatever form that I'm actually looking for. So a lot of the times for my work, if people are seeing the work while they're hearing me talk, they'll see a bunch of like tapered legs, for example, or sometimes the seats are hammered in, or there's bent pieces of steel. So a lot of times with that is I'll either make cuts into the steel and then bend them that way. So it's almost similar to kerf bending, which is a woodworking technique, which is basically making a series of relief cuts in the wood to sort of make it a little bit more pliable, and you can actually bend it around the form. Or I would make essentially pie cuts in a piece of tubing, for example, to make the tapers in the legs. So then I would make those pie cuts in just a straight cylindrical piece of tubing, taper them, and then weld them back together. So a lot of cutting and grinding and welding with my work.
That's really fascinating to me, especially about the kerf bending. You know, because it almost, you know, it's hard for me to see how that translates, but I've seen people do it in wood. So it's really cool that you're able to translate that into a metalworking process.
Yeah, for me, I mean, a lot of woodworking processes really translate pretty easily to steel because they sort of act similarly in a lot of respects. I mean, they're two totally different materials, but some of the processes that can be used for woodworking can easily apply to steel.
And that leads me just into my next question, which is, you're a woodworker and you're a metal worker. So I wonder how that experience in both sort of informs the other.
So we talked about kerf bending a little bit. So some of those more technical processes really apply to the metalworking, but also just knowing about the specifics of furniture making, like how high a seat needs to be, or like what height the arms need to be to make a chair comfortable, right? So it's like some of those applications also apply pretty easily too. So when I'm working, I generally don't work from like a live piece. I usually have to do a lot of Google image searches and a lot of looking on like first dibs and auction sites to sort of get lots of images and pictures of specific pieces that I'm working on. So sometimes I'll look out and get measurements, but other times I kind of have to use my furniture making and woodworking knowledge to sort of figure out like what specific heights and proportions need to be present there. And you can see some examples on my little mood board of sorts there. So yeah, the two disciplines for me really help each other out quite a bit.
That's so interesting to think about. And your furniture is really, I mean, I don't have all the language for it, but it's really classic in its design. And I think most people will have seen something at least sort of similar before in antique shops or in older homes. And I just wonder sort of what are the movements or designers, makers who have inspired you?
So it kind of goes across a whole bunch of different styles, really. I usually just try to go for pieces that are easily recognizable, or something that a person might relate to because they've seen it at their grandmother's house or something like that, or if they've seen it in an antique store. So I try to go for more forms that are gonna give people some basic sense of nostalgia about furniture, or something that's like really recognizable. In terms of specific styles, I tend to go towards shaker pieces quite a bit because personally I like how simple they are in terms of the forms, but then they're not afraid of color either. So the shakers, they've been around for a long time, but they weren't afraid to use color with their works. So it's something I personally gravitate toward. But when I'm thinking about how people are going to perceive these works, I tend to just go for a wide range of different styles.
That is really interesting. I don't think I really knew that about the shaker movement. That's so crazy. So is that why you use bright colors in your work? And I guess how do you know what the right color is? You just did a bench that you painted like bright purple. So I mean, how do you pick the color?
So that is a bunch of things, really. So the shaker pieces, like the light blue table that's in the show right now, they're called Millennial In-Law, and the shakers had what were called millennial laws, which sort of dictated what colors they were supposed to paint different pieces. So that I didn't really choose light blue in regards to that, really. But then I kind of think of the pieces too, like if I see them all together in a group, it's like, okay, I have a couple of black pieces, maybe I need to throw another red piece in there, another blue piece or something like that. So sometimes just aesthetic choices in terms of the pieces as a whole make that decision. And at other times it's really just sort of a play on words with the titles of the works. So the bench, for example, is purple because it's called Purple Rain. But rain is spelled R-E-I-G-N as opposed to the Prince song. And it's a Windsor style bench. It's sort of a play on like Windsor Castle and then Purple Rain. So that sort of influenced the color there too. So sometimes it's a little arbitrary, but sometimes it's really really well thought out and planned out. So.
Well, I'm a big fan of the bright colors. We don't often get to display color at the museum, so it's always fun when we are able to do that. And then sort of along the same like vein is your titles are really funny. There's an element of humor and definitely playfulness in all of your work. I love the title Rump Shakers for the two pieces. And then of course, my personal favorite in the show is Gorgeous George. If you guys get a chance to see it in person, there is an image transfer of George Costanza from Seinfeld. I'm sure you guys have seen the image before. It's hilarious. So is humor important to your work, and why is that?
Yes. I think I'm a funny person. I hope I'm funny. So I try to personalize my work and add humor to it whenever I can. And then I also think it's nice to not take furniture making too seriously. I mean, part of my frustrations with like how I got into making this body of work was that like woodworking like is the sole or excuse me, wood is like the sole medium for furniture making. So people take it very seriously, and there's some who only use specific tools and are prone to using like newer technology. So there's like these kind of unwritten rules sometimes about woodworking that I think this does not apply to. I'm like really, I'm trying not to offend all of my woodworker friends out there, but some of them take it a little bit too seriously. So for me, I try not to do that, and I try to make the work a little bit more personable in that respect. And so when other people are looking at it, so if someone doesn't have like a massive knowledge of furniture making or woodworking, they can kind of relate to it on a different level. So George is a good example because most people are probably familiar with Seinfeld or either love the show or hate the show, and probably a lot of people have seen that particular image too. And then for that chair in particular, that was also a play on the humor of it was a play on that particular style chair, where so the Regency style chair, where usually someone who would commission that piece would say that they want a landscape or a nude woman on the back of the chair just as a decorative element. So for me, putting George on there was like making it very specifically about the female gaze as opposed to the male gaze, and making fun of that really sort of silly furniture decoration, really.
That's so genius, because the image that we're talking about, I'm sure you guys have seen it before, is one where George Costanza is like, wearing like a classical sort of toga and in this classical pose, and as in a painting. So Sophie, as she was saying, is a sort of play on that portrait that you would have on a chair like that. That's hilarious to me. I love that. And this is a topic that we kind of talk about a lot at the museum, because you create these pieces that are really beautifully designed and made, and they're functional. They're comfortable if you try to sit in them. And people often relegate functional work to the craft category and place this distinction between craft and art. And I wonder, do you think there should be that separation? And how do you view your own work sort of within that context?
Yeah, it's a kind of a tough question. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to whether craft and art need to be separated. I think that's just kind of inherently there. In terms of the idea of the difference being functionality, I mean, art certainly had a functional element to it as well. We're really talking like prehistoric cave paintings, like those were meant to serve as a visual language when there was no written language yet. So that had a certain functionality to it. And then you move later on, and art started to become more about basically like a autobiography of the artist himself. So it was basically a way for an artist to sort of talk about their ideas in a visual way, right? Like, in that respect, that has a functionality to it as well. So where my work falls in that category, I do want people to appreciate the craft of it, because it is, I mean, the work is about the craft behind both woodworking and metalworking, or just the ideas of woodworking and sort of what goes into making a piece of furniture, and sort of those gender ideas about woodworking, or the environment that goes into woodworking and things like that. And it's also about the metalworking. But it's also art there. To me, they're art pieces too, because I'm trying to bring those issues to the forefront through the use of furniture. So yeah, it's kind of a difficult question to answer. I think most artists won't consider them art pieces, and certainly woodworkers won't consider them. Some woodworkers won't consider them real pieces of furniture because they're not made out of wood. So it's kind of in this weird little gray area, I guess. So I hope to be at least appreciated in some of these different areas.
We definitely appreciate you. I think I find that kind of fascinating, because I also want to acknowledge that you're a woman doing this craft that's in both woodworking and metalworking that's really dominated by men. I think I saw a picture of you on Instagram. You were teaching a class, and your whole class was men, and you're all holding up your stools you made afterwards. How are those experiences sort of informed what you do?
Yeah, so that happens quite a bit in furniture making. So yeah, that class was all men, and they were all mostly older than I was. So that was kind of funny, but that was to be expected, really. Like, I was expecting for that to happen, honestly. So in terms of it informing my practice, it's like it's really sort of justifying it in a way, because I started making this works to sort of exemplify that I am a woman in two male-dominated fields, woodworking and metalworking. So that sort of just prolongs that that idea, I guess. And I think a lot of female woodworkers, or like women, those of color or of different gender norms or whatever, are sort of changing those biases that are in woodworking. So we're seeing a lot more female representation, a lot more people of color in woodworking, and those of different sexual orientations. So it's happening. It's I don't know if it's in the forefront yet. So I as a woodworker and a furniture maker, I want to try to help that cause along. I don't know if I answered the question at all, but
Yeah, no, you did great. That was awesome. So Rest Never Sleeps has been the series that we've been talking about, and It's beautiful work. I hope you all get to take a chance to look at it. Where do you go from here? Do you want to keep on with this series? What are you thinking about coming next?
Yeah, so this is kind of a weird time to be like thinking about work at the moment. So I've been doing a lot of research during this time. So I've been thinking I am going to probably continue the work. It might take a different form, kind of. I am going to plan on still making steel furniture pieces. So right now I'm like thinking about using sheet steel in more decorative ways, like for marquetry and picture caps, probably. And also thinking of the use of steel for to create and see photos. That's some sort of two things I've been sort of really kind of heavily researching lately. So it's going to be maybe a little bit more decorative, maybe not so much focused on the forms of the furniture pieces, but really trying to push those boundaries a little bit and push what steel could do.
That's really exciting. And yeah, I'm excited, and I think everybody's excited to see what you do in the future. So I guess let's see if we have some questions from some viewers. Okay, really good one from Cassandra Redman. Cassie is our foundry apprentice at the Metal Museum. She's amazing. And she asks, Rust Never Sleeps is also an amazing Neil Young album. Does Neil Young figure into this series of work?
Yes, so that is a great question, because the album really did influence the body of work. So that album basically shows the progression of Neil Young's transition from sort of like a folk rock musical artist to becoming basically the godfather of grunge, right? He does that basically throughout the course of the whole album. So for me, I kind of related to that quite a bit, because I was making furniture when I started the work. I was making furniture, doing wood and steel stuff. I didn't really find my complete voice in making those pieces, and so it wasn't until I started making the Rust Never Sleeps series where I really felt like I found my voice and my just my medium, really, and what I really wanted to say through those pieces. So yeah, that album had a lot to do, and I listened to that on repeat for a long time when I was making the work. And I still do. One of my favorite albums.
Now I'm gonna have to listen to it. I've heard it before, but I want to listen to it more now. Okay, I got a question from Lori Gibson. Lori is the museum's education and outreach manager. She's amazing. And she asks, is one material more challenging than the other when making these forms?
Well, they're different. They have different challenges. Wood moves is a really popular saying in the woodworking community, because wood is an inherently living material. So it's depending on the seasons and depending on the weather, it's always going to twist or warp or do whatever kind of volatile thing it does. So that, like, joinery methods we've created to work around that. So steel kind of doesn't really do that so much, but if overheated, it'll tend to warp in weird ways, and it does work hardening, which you guys are familiar with, those who work in the medium. So if you work at it for too long, it's going to really harden up and be really difficult to work with. So I try to work around those things when I'm making my pieces, but it's all just kind of like learning, learn by doing, right? So you don't know what a particular material is going to do until you start working with it. And some wood stamp will act differently, right? So you're not really going to know how they're going to react to a particular environment or a particular joinery method. So they're just different. Yeah.
That's really cool. James Vanderpool, who is he's our foundry operations manager. He says, what's your favorite way to color and patinate? Do you mix traditional and contemporary ways of finishing and coloring?
Yeah. So the painting is just Rust-Oleum, like rattle can stuff, right? Because typically what I do is when I finish a piece, I'll spray paint the whole thing. And then I sand through it just by hand sanding it. The really big piece, I might use an overall sand just to get big spots out. But then rust, I use a solution of bromide, vinegar, salt, which Vivian Beer taught me actually. So Vivian Beer. And then that was it instantly. So that really gives it that really quick age look. But I do love using, like, as of recently, I just finished a piece that's like a demi-lune style table. So that was all patinaed and rusted. So I didn't use any paint for that one. And that actually left some of the elements of the hot rolled steel on there. So it had that sort of blue color, sort of these streaky natural rust lines in it. So that I actually left in it. I think that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, this is from Brandy Clemens. She says, I'm biased, but so many of your chairs are woven. And is that an homage to classic pieces you were mentioning, or a challenge? And how did you weave that rush and shaker chair?
Okay, so the pieces in the show are like that are actually woven are two shaker style chairs. So typically it would be with shaker tape. So for that, I actually just used thin steel strapping. So I found like a really thin gauge steel for that. And that was definitely, it turned out to be a challenge because I wasn't really quite sure how it was going to work. It's not really going to work the same way that an actual shaker chair with shaker tape does. So I had to essentially weld I had to tack weld all the pieces to the underneath side of the table. So working from front, so all the front to back shaker tape pieces, and then weave all the side to side pieces in, and then tack weld them all together. So I had to do everything kind of separately. So it was a bit of a nightmare. And then there's another chair that I think Brandy's referring to, which is not in the show, but that I actually used annealed wire for. And that was a huge pain. my hands were pretty sore for about 3 days after that. But for that one, I actually did weave it like a rush seat. Like every good woodworker, I YouTubed how to do that. And then I figured out the pattern of weaving that and then just use annealed wire as opposed to actual rush. So in that respect, it's like it didn't get as neat as, say, a rush seat would, but it has its own character to it.
Yeah, I just find all of this really fascinating. Yeah, I think the woven stuff, it looks really good. So, you know, as hard as it was, it looks awesome. So another thing from Cassie, she says, and we sort of covered this, but this whole Trump loyal effect, what is the significance of making the metal look like wood specifically?
So that really comes back to people mistaking my steel pieces for wood when I wasn't really going for that. I was really trying. So back when I was in grad school, I was really making these mostly like geometric forms, and they're sort of reminiscent of hammer forms and just kind of like plane blades and things like that. So they were really more abstract and more geometric in form. And I would blacken everything, so you didn't really get to see the steel all that much. But to me, I knew that they were blackened steel, but because they were furniture and because people maybe were not used to seeing that kind of color on steel before, people automatically assume that they were made out of some kind of wood, and I finished it in just a weird way. So it was really out of that frustration, me just being fed up with people already assuming that they're wood, that I figured I might as well just kind of trick them into believing it to begin with, and then it really kind of begs people to actually interact with the pieces a bit more. So they have to actually look really closely at them to see that they're actually not wood at all. And the antique look on there is actually the rust of the steel. So it's kind of my way of highlighting the steel for one, but also making it look like wood, if that makes any sense. So it's kind of like a weird dynamic there, I guess.
Yeah, it's really a shame that, you know, we can't have people see them in person right now, because the effect is really powerful. You really can't tell until you're up close. And even then, when we had your work in the 40 under 40 exhibition, people had a tough time, I think, not touching it to see, you know, is this wood, is it steel? So it's a really good illusion. So Jonathan Bledsoe has a question. He said, which piece in the show was the most fun to make?
Well, they're all kind of fun in their own respect, but they're also all kind of frustrating too. I think my favorite was George, just because I got to play around with the cane pattern in the steel. So it's a type of perforated sheet, but it mimics caning. And I also got to play with image transfers, which I've never done before. And then I get to put George Costanza on a chair, so like, that's pretty fun and pretty stupid too. But I think that was probably, and it also like really highlights the different techniques that I use. So you like see all the curve bent, don't see it, but there's all the curve bent pieces, all the tapered pieces. So that was probably my most, the most fun I've had working on a particular piece.
Yeah, I mean, all of them are fun. I imagine they were all fun to make. They all look amazing. So Lindley Schmidt on Facebook asks how long the show will be up. The good news is Sophie is letting us extend the show. So we're hoping that we'll leave it up for a good amount of time after the museum is back open to the public. So probably sometime in August and September, it will come down finally. But hopefully that will leave a lot of time for people to be able to actually come see it. Do we have any more questions on Facebook?
Anybody? These are all really great questions, by the way. I'm really excited to answer them. So yeah.
No, they are really good. I'm trying to think if I had any more. I mean, Gorgeous George is definitely my favorite in the exhibit. I mean, will you be doing more like image transfer stuff on work, do you think?
Yeah, so that's also one of the things I'm going to be researching more heavily during this kind of weird interim time. Because I like doing it, and it took a lot of like trial and error to get it right. And I'm not quite sure I even still got it right, but I think I got it pretty close for that chair. So I'm going to continue working on that as well. Because I'm really looking at like a lot of different styles of like painted furniture, and like again with like the parquetry and the marquetry, just like getting really kind of decorative with some pieces, like a little bit more time consuming, but a little bit more challenging too. So hopefully that works out.
Awesome. Jonathan Bledsoe, another question. He said, could you talk about your tools of choice?
Yeah, so for a long time, I really only used two tools, and that was my TIG welder and my angle grinder. And for a while, that really worked out for me because I was in the middle of doing the residency, and I had some access to the wood studio, but the metal studio, but I was actually working in the wood studio. So there was a lot of walking back and forth, which I really didn't want to do because I'm a little lazy in that respect. So I really just resorted to keeping my small little TIG welder in my studio and doing most of the welding in-house in there, and then grinding and cutting and doing all that stuff just in our little outdoor patio area that we had. And for the most part, those are two of my go-to tools. Because I can do, with the angle grinder, I can do all my grinding, I can do all my cutting, and yeah, I can do most everything with just those two tools. With the image transfer stuff, I had to get a laser printer, so that was one of the other tools I had to buy. And I actually found a really cheap one at Goodwill, so that was that. And then, and yeah, I guess that's, and then I use like hammers and things like that too, and vice grips, obviously. So just kind of hand tools too, but really it's just the welder and the angle grinder.
I love the simplicity of that. That's awesome. Well, yeah, if anybody has further questions, send them our way. We'll send them to Sophie. We'll answer them somehow. Otherwise, everybody, please go to the website, metalmuseum.org. Check out Sophie's work on her exhibit page. And Sophie, where can people find you if they want to know more about you?
My website is sophieglenn.com. I'm also on Instagram at arcburn_furniture. And usually if you just type my name, I usually pop up. And I'm also on Facebook too. So if you got any questions that you didn't think of now that you want to ask me later, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. So
Glenn with 2 N's, Glenn. All right. Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you to everybody who watched. We will.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I appreciate. This is a really great avenue. So I'm glad a lot of people were able to hopefully see it.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep this up, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of this in the future. We figured out we need to mute the other screen. That's great. So thank you so much, Sophie, and I appreciate everybody. Have a good.
Thank you, you guys too. Appreciate it.